Welcome, guys, everyone. It's probably better to say everyone than just guys. Um, being inclusive starts with your language. If that's the least you can do, then at least do that. So welcome, everyone. Glad you're here. Glad that I am here. Super happy that Monitorama came back to Europe to spare ourselves from maybe the flight over. The 12 hours is usually not very nice. So thanks a lot to Jason and everyone else around that. I think that actually deserves like a round of applause. And then just let me get my phone ready. I promise I'm not texting. I'm just using it as my clicky thingy. Here we go. Cool. All right. So Nagios, Sensu, Printfuse, and why the change of the tool actually doesn't change your mindset. So as you might have guessed from the title, a lot of this is actually going to be very much based on impressions and experiences that we have. It's not really super many statistics that we collected because it's also hard to collect statistics about the mindset of people and how they feel about monitoring system, right? So what are we actually going to do today? Short introduction, that's now, and then I'm going to say a few words about the systems that we have so that you have like an impression of the scale that we're talking about, and afterwards the Nagios that we came from, the Senso that we use next, and then the Prometheus that we're switching to now. You see we're pretty busy switching our monitoring systems. So, Rick, that's me. I'm an SRE at the eBay Classifieds group. Does that actually move when I shake it? An SRE at the eBay Classifieds group. We are basically a lot of smaller companies around the globe. It's a bit over 10 brands if you count the smaller ones in. And they're all loosely coupled together. So we as the SRE setups org are working tightly together. That's how I also had the chance to gather experiences from other people like the Mark Potts people or Kijiji Canada, which made this actually a bit more general than just my own impressions. But the focus will still stay on the German classifieds platforms. So I promised some numbers. That's eBay Kleinanzeigen, around 2,000 nodes. Mobility, around 1,500 nodes. Multiply that by number X because we're almost fully containerized. So we're running a bunch of containers per node. So we're not super small. We're not Google scale, obviously. No one is. For our on-call, we're doing a regular on-call rotation, and in addition to that, we have a NOC team in front of that. So why am I saying that? Because that gives you an extra bit of a challenge, because you cannot really assume that the NOC team knows for all the 10 platforms the same things that the SREs for all the platforms know, right? That's why this side note here. Okay, then let's hop straight in. Nagios, which is basically how we started and how it was when I joined the ECG. There was a single Nagios instance, super beefy blade compared to the virtual infrastructure that we had afterwards. And it did what Nagios just does, right? Regular static checks and then collect the results, and it will alert you either through Slack directly or PagerDuty. So much for the Nagios setup itself. How many of you have worked with Nagios? Okay, well, I will. All right, then you know what it's about. So basically what we had with Nagios by the time I joined was a very high level of noise. We had a whole lot of false positives as well in addition, but also a bunch of false negatives, which is even worse. And that established a bit of a culture of downtiming. So basically when I joined, I started to go on call and IRQ, so basically handling alerts during the daytime. I need to ask a bunch of questions. So I was like, oh, what's this alert about? I don't really understand it. It's not documented. Yeah, just go ahead, downtime it. Okay, good, fine. Why do we have it then? But later on to that question. So it turns out that over time, people were thinking Nagios is not the right solution for us anymore. We were more and more going away from having just blades. We were virtualizing more. We're using more and more containers. So we decided, let's just go for something that is more dynamic. And that also has like a rich set of APIs that you can leverage, make everything nice. And also we found a cool feature to cluster your monitoring machine setup that Nagios wouldn't really give us voluntarily. So after seeing this picture for a whole bunch of, what the fuck, stay away from the pult, they said. The pult is evil. And then your clicker doesn't. What the fuck? Yeah, so after seeing this picture for a little too long, a little too often in various variations, we decided to start making the change to Sensu. It was a pretty long process. It took roughly over a year. We tried to, when I say we, in that case, that means a task force of 2 people. So 2 people, 1 year, pretty decent amount of engineering work. We tried to unify all the checks in Ruby. Obviously, you don't have to do that for Sensu, as you might. Okay, let me ask that question again. How many of you have worked with Sensu, or know Sensu at least? All right. Well, so Sensu does accept pretty much everything that you give it. It doesn't necessarily have to be Ruby. We just decided to unify things a bit. So when a new engineer joins the team or someone that's not that involved, they would have just basically the assumption, okay, it's written in Ruby. I might or might not understand it. If not, I at least only have to learn Ruby and not Perl or whatever we use with Nagios for checks. We dropped around 500 checks, which is a rough 1/3. We refactored 80% of the checks, and then we left a good 20% unrefactored, which later on turns out was not the smartest idea, but we were, after a year, having a bit of time constraints. And in addition to that, also, honestly, you work 1 year on only rewriting checks from Bash and Perl and Python to Ruby. It really gets not fun and you really lose track on it and the focus on the team changed. So 20% of the checks were just carried over, almost copy-paste style, not too good. What we considered a good idea was we attempted to do a knowledge transfer. So basically the 2 people task force tried to extend their knowledge to the rest of the team and explain to them what Sensu gives them, what possibilities you have, what we changed, how it can be dynamic, how it can aggregate alerts, all these things. Yeah, that kind of didn't go too well. So we had a setup of Sensu, basically 3 nodes per data center then, with the backend running not a very recommended setup, as we're using Redis for everything instead of the Rabbit Redis setup that they recommend. We distributed our checks basically via Debian packages and the configuration of Sensu itself via Puppet. We had a mix of regular executed checks and then some dynamic checks. So what do I mean by that? We had some checks like a disk check or whatever. It was just regularly executed. We were alerted on it. Someone fixed it. Whatever, but we also had some more dynamic and aggregated checks. So basically, every time we spawn a new instance or a new application in our platform as a service solution, we would automatically create checks for it and alert in an aggregated way on it. So not alert on every instance down, but just over 50%, whatever. The problem, though, with not doing the perfect and full knowledge transfer, people didn't know that these things were possible, so they tended to just write checks the same style they did in Nagios, just in Ruby. So basically, we had a lot of checks where 1 container of 20 was down and someone got woken up in the middle of the night, even though Sensu was totally giving you the possibilities not to do that. That resulted in actually more downtiming than ever, so you just kept hearing more and more, yeah, downtime it. Someone really had an awesome idea. Look, I can write a script so you can downtime more faster. It's a shell script. It's on every machine. Amazing. We had a super high noise level. The NOC team was very unhappy with that. Simon told me a bunch of times. So basically, failing at the knowledge transfer. But yeah, I mean, I can tell you a lot of stuff. We can just take a look at it. So that's what we have now. Like, it's live. So yeah, you see, it's not super clean. Um, Usually, I would say not that bad, but the problem is that people get frustrated over it, right? No one likes to get woken up in the middle of the night for something that they wouldn't have to. But people have this tendency of not working on themselves. So what happened was, well, sensor is shit. Let's get something new. That largely correlated also with the time frame when Prometheus, in German it's Prometheus, it's whatever. So that largely correlated with the time frame when Prometheus came around, and people were like, "Yeah, that's going to solve all our problems." We're still in the process of migration. It's not so easy because you don't have like the same way of executing checks, so you cannot just copy paste that easy. We do attempt it though. So basically, we're trying, right? It's not all that bad though. We did make some improvements from Nagios to Sensu. There are a lot less false alerts. We have a lot less downtime for the platforms themselves, and a good bunch of the checks are actually somewhat smart. So we're getting somewhere. And now, yes, we're using Prometheus. The migration is in progress from a regular event-based to a metric-based alerting and checking. We need to refactor all the checks, obviously, right? It works in a whole different way. Also the alerting via Alert Manager. And we're attempting a better knowledge transfer this time, really. We really do. So the information about Prometheus is we have a bunch of clusters per platform, multiple instances per data center, even though Prometheus themselves claim clustering is not their thing. But you can do various setups like we did, like smaller instances, scraping various platform as a service solutions, a bigger instance, scraping all of that, and then we back up the metrics. So you can somewhat cluster it. We do that. We configure our alert manager, not really the checks, but our alert manager via SaltStack. We're still new to it and we have a lot to learn, obviously, right? I think most of us will have to. I would probably even consider all of us early adopters for it. It's really young. We hope for less noise. I put it on. I'm really believing in us. We hope for less noise, less downtimes if we follow our principles. So what we learned from the first migration and also the beginning of the second migration, and what you might or might not want to learn from it as well. So here's the point from the beginning where I put on the numbers. Not every approach to things works for everyone, right? So if you're significantly smaller than us or significantly bigger than us, or you just don't like what the fuck we did, you don't have to do it the same way, obviously, right? Even though the first one and the last point I do recommend to everyone, involve everyone in your migrations. What do I mean by that? I don't mean have the whole team work on your migration and drop everything else. Obviously, that's not going to work out. But if you establish base principles around your monitoring and alerting, let the team know. Explain to them what is possible and how they can easily do that. Get everyone on board. And obviously, reconsider everything. How many of you have read the Google SR ebook or heard of it? Okay. So they're basically having some main questions around your alerting that you should really take care of. What are you alerting on and whom are you alerting, right? So basically it doesn't make sense if the case X comes, you have an application, it's 20 containers, one of them dies, you actually don't care because your platform as a service solution is going to spawn a new one in 10 seconds. You don't need to wake anyone up for that. Probably not even for 3, 4, or even 50% of the containers dead. Consider when you have to alert and don't just alert on everything. And also consider whom you alert. That was a use case for us in particular, was the NOC team that I mentioned before. If our database master is dead, there's no point in me alerting the NOC team. They're not going to fix it. How should they? They cannot. So alert people that can fix the actual issue. And last but not least, again, involve everyone. That's the most important thing, because that keeps you from people frustrated, and that keeps you from people saying your solution, whatever it may be, whatever name it has, is shit and they want a new one. That's what helps you. So, whoops, that was too early. Did you see that? Why can't I say someone needs to pay my bills at the bar? So, yeah, we do hire in across the globe, but mainly that was it. And now there's the slot for questions then, if you have any. Yes? It's not hard, not easy to see. Yeah. So basically yeah, so what techniques are we using to get people involved with using our stuff, like our Prometheus? Okay. The monitoring currently is mainly owned by the SRE team itself. When getting developers on board, we basically give them access to everything if they care, because then usually that's a bigger task force, and that's a bigger plan that takes a bigger effort. So we just say, okay, look, we start from 100% trust, and then if you fuck up, we go down and we limit you. But from the very beginning on, we would always say, okay, you want to get involved, you want to get stuff done, here's the access, off you go. And that's how we enable people to use it. If we let them on our Prometheus or if we get them their own, that corresponds with our setup. So we have we're running a private cloud, and every developer has their own dev tenant. We have a shared non-prod tenant and a production tenant, and basically we have our config management and infrastructure as code set up in a way that everyone can spawn a miniature version of the production platform in their own tenant in approximately 5 to 10 minutes. So if they want, they can just build their own and play around with it. If they want to start getting involved into ours, then we always suggest to them, please start in non-prod first, don't just test in production. So that way. Yep.
So I think everyone agrees that the communication part is a very difficult one when you do one of these things and you have to pass it over. It's usually very challenging. What would you say that were some things that you tried the first time that didn't work out at all, and what are you trying new now that you hope it will be better?
So what are things that we tried out the first time that didn't work out, and things that we're trying now that we hope for them to work out? Basically, we have we used to have a weekly meeting among the SRE team. It was happening every Friday. It's a knowledge sharing session. And basically, we were going there, either Luis, so the colleague of mine, and me, so we were going there and presenting, look, this is what we did. But we were figuring out later on now that we might have lost people along those meetings. So we're basically just working a bit on our meeting culture, meeting structure. We're doing hands-on workshops for people if they want to come. And we always try to get someone new involved. For example, one of us goes on vacation. That's a good point for someone else to really come, sit up, and not sit up, step up, and be more involved during that time phase, and that usually helps. Because from the experience, the most you learn about a system is when you work on it yourself. So we try to have people be more hands-on. Yeah. If we use any non-technical approaches for that, for getting better at it, well, yeah, I mean, what I mentioned here, like having the knowledge transfer, having the meetings, that's basically what we try to educate people, and we're still in the process of getting better at it. At least what I would say, the best point is that we accepted that we kind of failed on the Nagios Sensu migration, was doing the non-technical things. We accepted that, and from there on, we're trying to improve, right? So the non-technical things is also somewhat always coupled with technical. I don't think it works completely without it. You can make it high level, like what are you alerting on, why, how, so base principles. That's as non-technical as it goes, in my opinion. But if you really just go above that point, then we are a bit afraid that people will get also bored a bit. Yeah, yeah, yeah. How much time we chose on taking the right solution? The first time the decision-making process started even before I was hired and took around 3/4 of a year. Because a lot of solutions were basically in that discussion, and that just the loudest person won, kind of. No, I'm just kidding. It all went, actually not. It all went by facts, but we took our time. With Prometheus this time, it was a bit of a different case. For one, we're building a new platform, so we had to choose something quite fast. And we just relied a lot on the experiences that the other entities in the ECG made. Some were already using Prometheus when we made the decision, and they were quite happy with it, the way it was to be handled. And then, honestly, we're also following an industry trend a bit. I'm not gonna lie about it. Does it actually work time-wise, Jason? Okay, cool. Go for it. So really, the core principle is to first think about what you actually want to achieve with an alert. That's the main question, right? So before that, it was always a bit of, all right, I have this, I need alerting, I will just apply whatever everyone else applies usually, even though it didn't make sense. So for Prometheus and for building it now, we're going a bit of a different approach. We're thinking about, okay, what is this? What do we really need to know about it? And who can fix it? So those are basically the three main questions that I would call principles. And following those, we expect a lot less noise actually. And that also includes acceptable failure. I mean, everyone here probably knows that for whatever component you have, 100% uptime is just a dream that we're not going to achieve, never. For most components, yes, I know there are some that believe they can. But either way, so the point I was trying to make is, if there's a service that only needs to be up 70% of the time or 70% of its own capacity, then I don't need to alert on 5% of it failing, or 10, or 20. Is that cool? Yep. Of course, you need to know everything. Yes. We assume that we don't have to care. Oh yeah, the question. So the question was, as a systems engineer, you usually have this approach of checking the underlying system itself, whereas Prometheus and some other solutions out there are more application-oriented, service-level-oriented, I would probably call it. So how we get around it? Basically, in a lot of cases, we just ignore the underlying system. We just decided not to care. So we're switching over almost everything into our private cloud. and we try to scale out everything horizontally. And we try to pack everything in containers that run in platform as a service solutions. So we plan everything that we do with an acceptable loss of at least 30% of the whole infrastructure. And basically then the assumption is if it's more than 30%, you probably know way before your monitoring knows. We also like to call that customer alerting. No, I was really just kidding about that. No, we have a cloud team. They're taking care of the underlying hypervisors. And if we lose more than 30% in a complete region, we are 100% sure they will get us involved. They will get someone from each platform involved, and then we know. And besides that, we are considering how to do it. Yes, there is a point. Of course, you don't want to have that long term, right? You want to know at some point. You just don't want to get woken up in the middle of the night. We didn't fully solve it yet. I don't see anyone, but it's super bright. Okay, cool. Well then, thanks everyone.